Anyway, so thank you. I'm so grateful to be gathered again, Ruth, with your group. And I can't remember what year it was okay.
9 years. Yeah.
9 years ago, we were at the Nehemiah Center, and it was a wonderful time. And so I'm glad that Mitchell decided to come back. In the meantime, at the time when you were here, the Nonviolence Network was still producing its Peace Show. And so we stopped doing the Peace Show, and we started something called the State of Nonviolence. We made a commitment to do 5 years of the State of Nonviolence. And we just had the third one last weekend, and Brian Terrell was present. And the first time we had a connection with Brian was in 2016. The Cleveland Nonviolence Network convened, I don't know, it ended up being like 70 groups. We had 400 people that came and participated in an alternative convention because the Republican convention was here. And the group wrote a platform. But the part that I want to focus on is the scaffolding of our platform was our way of trying to define nonviolence for people that may not be familiar with it, or for people that thought it was a disengaging kind of commitment. And so our scaffolding of our platform was 5 core practices. And the first one was radical amazement. The second one is radical hospitality. The third is good stewardship to create shared abundance. The fourth was compassion for every sentient being and ecosystem. And the fifth was truth, reparations, and reconciliation. And so I think that this weekend we are going to touch on all of those things, because I'm radically amazed that people would travel so far and come here to Cleveland in November. And I'm hoping that we will rise to the radical hospitality that we've all committed ourselves to. As to the fifth one, which is, I think it's less attention, I think the movie tomorrow night, Dispatches from Cleveland, will talk about some of the truths that we live with locally, and what we need to do in order to bring racial justice to our communities. So, and I think Kathy's poem speaks a lot about that kind of vision in a kind of different way. So we're going to introduce Kathy Flora, who's a member of the Cleveland Nonviolence Network, the Sierra Club. I mean, she's like everywhere, right? And so we're very, very grateful to have Kathy, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the poem tonight. Thank you.
Ainsley has not been allowed outside or felt the sun on his face in 2 years. A small group of us visit him in Geauga County, where he is imprisoned for simply requesting asylum. He has been granted asylum twice, but is still locked up with less rights than someone that committed a serious crime. It is only recently, through the work of volunteers, that he has been able to communicate with his family. They came across this letter by mistake that he wrote to his daughter this week. He gave them permission to share it, and they translated it from the French that he wrote it in. To my daughter, if you think a smile is stronger than a weapon, if you believe in the power of a hand offered, is there, some people can't hear me, I'm sorry. If you think that what brings men together is more important than what divides them, if you think that being different is a value and not a danger, if you know how to look at each other with a bit of love, if you know how to prefer hope to suspicion, then peace will come. If you think it's up to you to take the first step rather than the other, if the look of a child still manages to disarm your heart, if you can enjoy your neighbor's joy, if the injustice that strikes others is as vivid as the one you have suffered, if For you, the stranger is a brother who offers you. If you can give a little of your time for love, if you know how to accept that another gives you something, if you share your bread and you know how to attach a piece of your heart to it, if you think that a pardon goes farther than revenge, then peace will come. If you can sing for the happiness of others and dance for their joy, if you can listen to the sorcerer who makes you waste your time and keep smiling, if you know how to accept criticism and learn from it without criticizing back, if you welcome and adopt a different opinion of yours, then peace will come. If you refuse to beat your chest on the chest of others, if for you the other is first a brother, if anger is for you a weakness, not a proof of strength, if you'd rather be less than to be someone, if you refuse to believe that after you it is a disaster, if you rank yourself on the side of the poor and the oppressed without thinking of yourself as a hero, if you believe that love is the only force of persuasion, if you believe that peace is possible, then peace will come. Then peace will come. I love you.
I'm going to invite the Catholic workers to come forward. The house that you're staying in, the mission house, was a Catholic worker community. I don't know for how long, and I believe that Jim Lysak in the back actually came from North Carolina to be a part of the Catholic worker, and Michael was here when the Catholic worker formed, and Jim was part of the conversation when creating the Catholic worker, recreated it, because there had been a Catholic worker during the heyday of Dorothy Day, and she actually spent her 65th birthday in the Corrigan's house not far from here. So we are connected in all different kinds of ways with the Catholic worker. So Mike, I'm going to take it over to you.
All right. I think I need to take a chair up there so I can sit and talk. Because I have to. So there's going to be sort of an extended conversation about Cleveland Catholic workers, very short witness. So let me introduce myself. And my name is Mike Fiala. I'm part of the Cleveland Catholic worker of the Great Lakes Basin, the Lake Erie Basin, and the Cuyahoga River, right? We don't want to think in terms of political designation anymore. So it's good to sort of just re-identify ourselves. So the people who I invited to participate, Jim Schleck, why don't you introduce yourself? Yeah. Paul Sherlock, Gene Kosmak. So we're all going to participate. Other people, Tim Musser, Jim Mysak, Maria, have all part about all these actions. Pat Needham, Kathy Flora, actually recent, and Maria Smith. So I have 60 pages up here, and mostly it's pictures, not text. So I think I'm going to talk for 15 to 30 minutes, and then we're going to expand the conversation. And at some point, I'll get tired fast. So let me sort of get started. Everything I put up here is inaccurate in some way. I realized immediately the Nonviolence Network did the peace show till 2011 for 10 years. So I'm already like thinking about things that I got I don't even know that we really started the Racial Witness in 1985. I showed up in 1989, and they had been doing it. That's the nature of folk history, right? You don't have the exact detail. So I spent four and a half hours yesterday in the afternoon when it was raining, putting this together, because I said it might be helpful to have pictures and something. And so in some sense, it's a record of trying to describe things that we've been doing for a long time. And then I threw in things that no one will connect with other than me. But that's okay. Or I might just try it. Okay, so first thing is to think about is the Galley worker is a community. We're devoted to one another. We have this bond of relationship, and we try to actually live what we would like the world to be. And we fail miserably at it. But we keep trying and pointing. And so this is, you notice, the mission house in the background. Sometimes a source of pain for the Catholic, because we used to be there. But I thought it was a great picture. I liked it. It's one of the few I have, because I don't have these digital photos. I have a flip phone. We eat dinner together at the Gather Worker House Sunday through Thursday at 6 p.m. And it's a community dinner. I just thought that was a good image of what it is to have a community. And that's the classic Catholic worker. That's a photo in our new house. There's a certain sweetness of just looking at the pictures of people I love. That's the storefront where we do hospitality. It's nearby. So everything, this is sort of like a village in a big city, the near west side. So that's really a community with lots of extended community members and a part of the county. We have a mission statement. You don't need to read it, but I just thought it would work for me. And then sometimes we practice the aims and means as the Catholic worker. I like this quote. I used it yesterday or 2 days ago with somebody. Violence is a failure of imagination. And I think it represents the continual example of what happens when violence happens. It's the Peace Show and the Catholic Workers' creative attempts at the air show have always been stretching our imagination and trying to point to another. If anybody wants to make a comment, feel free to. When we've been doing our reflections lately, I've been using this Gandhi quote from Thomas Merton about that the one who cannot protect himself or herself or his or her nearest and dearest for their honor by nonviolent when he faces death may and ought to do so by violently dealing with the oppressor. The one who can do neither of the two is worthy. It's serious business. And Gandhi understood that it's okay to use violence if you're not it's better to be a coward. It is better to use violence than be a coward. And so you don't usually think of Gandhi like that. And so I like to highlight the idea of nonviolence is a more powerful force. And violence is worse if you don't understand that you're supposed to be doing something better. This is my favorite quote about that no one ever quotes from Jesus. Jesus spoke to them in parables. How can Satan expel Satan? And if a country is divided against itself, that country cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan has stood up against itself and is divided, it cannot stand, but is having an end. No one is able to plunder the vessels of the strong man by entering his house unless he first binds the strong man, then he can plunder his house. We're in the business of plundering the goods that the government has taken from us for the military. And Jesus was a thief who was going to plunder those goods. We don't think of it like that. But it's a powerful image. I spent way too long learning to read New Testament Greek. so that I could understand the Bible. And thinking about peacemakers, actually the Greek can be understood as peace doing. It equally means the same thing, peacemaking and peace doing. And then if you transliterate words, which we often do, like make them into English, it's actually, you could call it, blessed are the peace poets. We oftentimes don't hear the power of our tradition because we translate things over and over again in the standard way, and they're lifeless. If you heard the Beatitudes as blessed are the peace poets, what? Blessed are the peace poets. If you heard in church a translation of the Beatitudes as blessed are the peace poets, for they will be called the children of God, it would get your attention. That's a legitimate alternative translation. And in some sense, we're always stretching our imagination by which to create alternatives to the violence of our culture, in the violence of the way we do business in this country. Okay, now to the point. That was my introduction, thinking like, hey, I'm not going to talk about the air show. I'm talking about our community. That's who we are. This is, the usual suspects are here. And we're talking about, so this picture is from 2018, and it's not very, well, we were in front of the gate at the air show, and in some sense, it's an effort to make our presence known. Let me see. The great thing about our air show witness, oftentimes it's not Catholic workers doing it. It's our friends who are participating. So Nina, I'm not sure I know the other one.
Rosemary Palmer.
Rosemary, I thought it was, right. So they're using and holding up the Catholic worker works of war, works of mercy, right? That's the power of a community. We join together, even if it's not the Catholic worker, it's the extended community participation.
Just a footnote, Rosemary Palmer's son was a Marine that was killed in Fallujah, I believe.
So this is what I might do, what might be, maybe I just continue going this way. So this is in front, this is at the lakefront is an airport where they conduct the air show. And maybe I should go to the end. Is there a speedy way to get to the end of this?
I don't know.
Okay.
Not if you have 60 of them.
Okay, so part of it is, we sometimes try to get the big picture of like what we do and then come down to individual examples of what we're doing. This is the opposite, showing you what we have been doing in very concrete ways. So we show up anywhere from 5 to 25 people at the air show, and this year we did a 6-day fast, liquid only fast, and we showed up at the Federal Building 5 of those days for specific witnesses, which is very close by, and focused on particular topics that year, that each day. We handed out every day the War Resisters League pie chart. So, I mean, that pie chart tells the story, and that handout is an incredible summary of going to the point. So consistently appreciate that. So you can see this is Paul Sherlock using the. Do you remember what you were doing at this moment, Paul?
What?
See yourself here. You're using the megaphone.
Oh, I said, I heard some, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we went right in front of the gate where people enter, and we had signs, and we were using the megaphone to communicate our message. The essence of it is the Blue Angels are these FA-18 Hornet fighter jets. They're painted up blue, so they look like entertainment, not like fighter jets. And then they do the incredible maneuvers to get people's attention. 40,000 to 100,000 people show up on a 3-day weekend. And what sort of is lost is the idea that these are actually fighter jets. And they are incredibly expensive. And so we have consistently shown up to present the message that this is warplanes as entertainment, and it has no business, and that there's an alternative. So we have show up. We've done many different things over many years, sowing seeds of peace, by giving little packets of sunflower seeds. We've done skits where we've had Billy the Bomber becomes a peace plane, Billy the Peace Plane, to the tune of Frosty the Snowman. We have done What Are Your Priorities as a game show alternative, and then we have just showed up and with banners, massive banners. So let's move on. Maria Smith with the megaphone. You want to say anything about it? Okay. Well, we'll come back to this is there are two, there's a plaza which I call Warplanes Plaza. They name it an aviation plaza. And there are two fighter jets mounted right in front of the place where the air show goes on. The air show has been going on since the 30s. Mostly it was air races. And then it became, in the 60s, mid-60s, it became a focus with the Blue Angels and an air show with a huge, growing military presence. So massive recruiting and all sorts of warplanes on display. You can sort of see so they have a Flying Thunderbird F-16 fighter jet is on the left side, and then on the right side is a Blue Angel FA-18. Then we have a community reflection after we do this. And we have a vigil the night before. So other things in previous years, sow seeds of peace. That's the message on the sunflower seeds. This envelope contains sunflower seeds, seeds of peace. They represent our belief in peace and respect for life. We offer them to you with our hope that you and your family will plant them, water them, and watch them grow. Today's air show glamorizes war and violence, planting seeds of war. The jet fighters here for this festival are not built for entertainment. They are designed to attack and destroy human beings. We believe that when a community celebrates war making in this way, it waters the seeds of war and teaches our children to enter the cycle of violence. We ask you to reject this celebration of war and violence that the air show represents. Not to ignore the problems of the world, but to consider that there are other solutions, one without insignificance of collateral damage. As you watch these seeds sprout and blossom, we hope they will inspire you to sow more seeds of peace in this world. It's always interesting to talk to you when you come and do these things. So we had a conversation. So those are some of our banners. So I mentioned the other ones previous years. So in 2006, people went inside and did a witness in front of one of the bomb planes and got arrested. Jim, you want to talk about that at all? Jim Schleck? Tim? Yeah. They're both here.
Yeah, it was about 10, 12 years ago, 2006. 5 of us entered the Cleveland National Air Show, which is largely a militarized advertisement to young and old alike about the need for massive amounts of money to be put into the military. And so this year we went into the air show, and there were 5 of us who decided to do this nonviolent civil disobedience, where we fearless would lay down and play dead under an A-10 Warthog plane. And then another, Jimmy Schlecht, who's back here, he was kneeling down and praying over us, and Chris Nestrick and Megan Wilson held up our banner, which says, "War is not entertainment. These planes kill." Cleveland Catholic workers. And as we were laying there or standing up, we sang the St. Francis Peace Prayer. And I also want to add that there were about 11 or 12, another dozen people in there with us, walking around, making sure that we were relatively safe. But the reason we went in there without paying is because we had, ahead of time, asked the air show for a press pass. And they issued us about 15 press passes. Because they thought the Catholic Worker newspaper was a legit, and it is more legit than any other. So we got in there free of charge, and we stayed there. And when we were actually there for about 20 minutes until the police and the guards came along and said we had to move and leave, and we refused. So they cuffed us and took us off to the Justice Center, and we all spent a night in jail. The reason we did this primarily, and I want to add that we got together 1 or 2 days a week for 6 weeks prior to this action to practice how we were going to react in the face of any violence or anybody pouring beer on us or spitting at us or anything like that. We weren't expecting that. However, we wanted to be prepared for that. So we were given this great gift a day or two after the air show, and that was a columnist, editor for the Cleveland Plain Dealer, our daily rag here, wrote a very scathing and arrogant article against the Cleveland Catholic Worker for playing dead and this whole witness. And because of that column, it generated a few hundred letters to the editor, which a week or two after his column was published, they published, I don't know, maybe about 25 or 30 of them in the paper. So that was basically the action we took in 2006. I just
Yeah, it was actually on the front page of the Plain Dealer that year.
Favorable or unfavorable or mixed?
I'm sorry?
What was the tone of the letters? Were they favorable, unfavorable, or what?
Very favorable. Yeah, I'd say at least 10 to 1. And Maria Smith and others with the Cleveland Nonviolent Network took it upon themselves brilliantly, I would say, that the next year they published a little booklet called Letters to the Editor, which had many of the better letters in there, and we sold them right at the air show. And Maria was going to we still have quite a few left over. They didn't sell that good, did they? But she's going to bring some tomorrow. But I just wanted to read you the letter to the editor that I wrote, and it got published after this action. And here I'm speaking about this Kevin O'Brien, who was the editor / op-ed person who wrote the scathing article against us. So I say, though I harbor no resentment toward him as one of the 5 nonviolent protesters arrested at the Cleveland National Air Show on September 3rd, I believe Kevin O'Brien's attack on us was unwarranted. We are neither naive nor disrespectful, but are conscientious objectors to war and the preparation for war. We object to killing. We object to killing in the name of capitalism. We object to killing in the name of communism. We object to killing in the name of religion and terrorism. We object to being forced to register for war, and we object to being forced to participate in the preparations for war. We object to killing innocent civilians, and we object to killing soldiers. We object to nuclear weapons, and we object to conventional weapons as well. When war comes, many of us will perform peaceful alternative service. Many will go to jail rather than compromise deeply held beliefs. But we will not fight. We will not kill. Our direct nonviolent action of civil disobedience at the air show was done peacefully, openly, and in a civil manner. We love our country and all countries and all peoples. We are Catholic Christians, not flag-burning anarchists. Thank you.
Jim,
Just a memory that's
What's your
struck with me from that was as we were walking to the plane, heard this explosion and turned around and there was fire spewing through the ground. When I looked up, there was a plane that was flying over and they were actually doing simulated bombings. These parachutes were being dropped with these mini bombs, and they would explode on the ground, and then fire would shoot up. And this was billed as family and that is exactly the opportunity.
thanks. I think that's sort of, so, I think that's right. There we go. The Nonviolence Network was on Peace Show 2002, 2011. I got it right. So, sort of highlighting how the Nonviolence Network came together. And then they actually did the People's Justice and Peace Convention when the RMC came. Peace Show was this incredible festival of music and nonviolence. It had anywhere from 250, 300 to 1,000 people. And it came right after 2001, which thank God it was September 11th, and so we had just finished the 2001. We didn't. So 2002 we had the first Peace Show, and let's see. I wanted to show. Yeah. Here's a picture of the person who was significant in making that happen. Jim Munstead. I would say that it was entirely designed, but my experience is that everybody participates in these things, and someone decides to put out an idea, and everybody gets inspired. So, Jim, do you want to talk about that at all? Sort of what happened in 2002 and how your experience with the Catholic worker. Yeah, because I think in some sense the Catholic worker, having done it, I started participating in 1989 in the Catholic Worker Witness at the air show. So Jim came to Cleveland in 1991, probably, or 90? Yeah.
Yeah, so, my family and I have been part of the air show witness for several years, and to be honest with you, I got tired of saying no. You know, I just got tired of saying no without having something to say yes. And I think that the September 11th really crystallized for me the sense that the responses to that were all going to be based on grotesque violence. And if we have anything to contribute to the conversation, no. And I think that was the genesis of the Peace Show, was that the air show being billed as family friendly. Why don't we have an alternative celebration that's family friendly, that's sort of in the vicinity of the air show, that people can choose to come to and celebrate with the tradition. And I think that's sort of what the Peace Show was. Sure, but you know, I got tired of saying no, yes. And for me, you know, this life is really about what to say no to and what to say yes to. For me, I gotta have something to say yes. And that's what the Peace Show is.
Great. Anything else? Others? Maria?
Well, I remember Jim saying, first of all, Jim was the person that called us together on September 12th in his living room and said, we have to tell people that there's some alternative to what they're really going to do. And that was the formation of the Cleveland Nonviolence Network, because really, Jim, I don't want to speak for you, but what I recall you saying is that because most of us come from a point of faith, that we needed to articulate it in a way that if there was not a shared faith, people could still understand it. And so then Jim started talking about the efficacy of nonviolence. And so that's how we came up with this phrase that we used throughout the peace show, which was nonviolence works, war doesn't, to kind of put, the balance together. And the other thing I remember Jim saying was that the only way he was going to be able to get through the dark days was by music and the arts. And so that was the other kind of fuel for the peace show. So that was my recollection, Jim, of what the things that you were saying at that time.
And I think we really envisioned the peace show as not a teaching for adults, but as a festival for families, right? And I think that's really.
So it was at the Freestand, East 9th and Lakeside, a park very close to the lakefront, with this incredible icon. And so you can see there's partly a stage where music was, kids, real angels don't drop bombs, musicians. It's a party with music. John Rennell is worldwide icon. Now this was a classic example of what you would want.
I just, in watching that, I just realized that we made the paper with that.
Right.
I
That's exactly right. You were in it on the front page.
Telling somebody, and
Right.
I forget, what was the caption underneath there? But that got in the real angel.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Right, so the front page after the arrest in 2006 was on the front page with D. And that in the background.
Yeah, keeps on the stick up, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, she's got the picture right
Yeah,
there,
that's,
right there.
yeah.
But that slogan got
Right.
it, which I thought was excellent.
And Paul Catholic did all these bands, a lot of them. Yeah, because you're going to see that coming up here in a second. So, in John Rennell's bike, the World Bike was to me the classic example of what this festival was like. These are people riding it. This is Sharon Ledger with her granddaughter, Monty. So, and then little other kids would wheel them around. Just an incredible entertainment. Then we also had paper airplane as an alternative, the peace plane. So on one side you have the content of what warplanes do, and then what peace planes do, they actually help. So we spent the whole afternoon, or I should say I spent the whole afternoon with kids making peace planes. And I have examples that I brought along. And so we would be doing this all day and flying them all day. But then we had a big launch at the end of the day from the stage. And one landed it. So there were tables for justice at the P show. Justice for Arthur Tyler, who was actually at that time was going to be executed, and then he was that was commuted, and we were working still on his being able to be released. Luke Humphrey and the Veterans for Peace were at this event. One day of the Iraq War, what the cost was and what could be done instead. Banners and their makers. Paul did so many of those banners with his spray paint that I put him in there. And so here are examples. So we had it staged along the whole highway, going to the air show. War is not entertainment. War no more. Nonviolence works. Imagine a war plan. It's interesting that there was a small eye on that particular one. No More War, Peace Through Justice, Cleveland Nonviolence Network. So Seeds of Peace, 2010 Peace Show. And so describing a little bit more of the content of why the Catholic worker was part of this witness over many years, how Joe Lehner and people from the community, the Salvadorans who were part of the who had come from Central America, were living in the Catholic worker and saying, hey, when they heard those jets, it sounded like what they experienced in El Salvador. And said, hey, and so there was a sense like, oh, these planes are not just entertainment. They're actually warplanes that need to be highlighted. So when we started going that. This is what the Blue Angels appearance is about, right? This spectacular sense of formation. This is the place where this all occurs, in the plaza, Aviation Plaza. And then these are the flyers we did for the 2018. We handed out a flyer about the content of what we just said. Oh, one of the things I highlight in this flyer is the cost for the Blue Angels at the air show, $1.9 million. The fuel was $120,000 a month. Now, where do you get this kind of information? The Seattle Times, apparently, Erica, the Seattle Times did some research. And they don't get straight information, right? Because the military doesn't want you to know. And so they did an analysis to figure out how much. And I think it's under recruiting. The Blue Angels are under recruiting for the Navy. And so going through the Blue Angels and all the details, they figured it out at $1.9 million for the 3-day show. So, you know, Martin Luther King, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government, from the Beyond Vietnam speech. These are things that we've highlighted over many years, things that we put in our flyers, things we share. This past year, we did 6 days of action against militarism in the U.S., as I was mentioning earlier. At the federal building, 5 of those days, and then the 6th day at the air show. Highlighting different things. Then other parts of the message, how we shared the War Resistance League's pie chart. This was one of the flyers we had for the day. Kathy Kelly's story about what's being done in Yemen in terms of the U.S.-backed Saudi war, refueling, and then the content. The U.S. is complicit. And then we also highlighted the Plowshares, Kings Bay, Plowshares Action, with the content from that. And I think that's it.
Oh, nice.
So, I think that's probably 30 or 40 minutes. Jim, Paul, Gene, why don't you come on up and talk about your experiences about this? And then we can have more of a conversation and dialogue.
Well, as I really reflected on the different memories I'd had from participating in the air show witness, it struck me that one of the most disturbing memories that I came up with as a result of the air show was not at all at the air show. And I'd like to just share that with you for a moment and its impact. But Paul and I go out on street outreach every Friday morning for an agency called Caroline's Health Center. And I remember 3 years ago, was Friday before the air show, and we were at a campsite in the downtown area where about 3 or 4 people were living in tents. And we went in and brought supplies and blankets and stuff like that, and we were visiting with folks there. And as we were doing that, the Blue Angels were rehearsing for the air show. And they came flying over real loud and very loud. And one of the guys, Dale, who is a vet, started to really pay attention. And then they flew over again. And as they flew over again, he started talking in military jargon, and he started to make like he was holding a rifle and kneeling and looking up in the air. And they flew over 2 or 3 more times. And as they did that, he became more and more psychotic and thinking he was the battlefield. And eventually, after about a half hour, 45 minutes, we actually ended up taking him to Lutheran Hospital in West 25th Street, and he was admitted into the mental health ward for a number of days. And the other tragic part of all that was that he, as a vet, he wasn't allowed to go to the Wade Park VA hospital because he had been in there years ago and had a physical confrontation with one of the staff. So he was actually pretty much barred from receiving services. So it just struck me that how the air show was contributing to his continued trauma and victimization of what he experienced when he was in the service. And that's just always really stuck with me. So.
Hey. Oh, me.
Okay, so I haven't always participated in the air show, but I know that I went a couple of years ago in the afternoon with Tim Musser and overheard them talking on the microphone inside about what a wonderful thing it is to join the military and realize what a recruitment tool it was. And at that point, I decided I was going to try to go every year. This year, I got involved with the planning and decided to go into the federal building and pray and do a peace walk and some singing. And I was a little nervous about that. You got to share your ID, and he didn't know what to do with us, but pretty much ignored us. The second day we went in, they said, wait a minute, you can't go in yet. We got to check with our boss. Maybe it was the fourth day, I don't know. But so we're all standing there, and calls up for his supervisor, and next thing we know, he says it's okay, do whatever you want. So after that, we didn't have any problem going in there and walking around, and I lost my inhibitions by the end of the week by just the fact that we were making friends with the security guards who weren't actually employed by the government. They were private firms, so really they didn't have a lot of stake in it. I like to think of the peace walk as spreading, like exercising the evil that goes on in that building and spreading peace. So for me, that was a real important part of it. We didn't even talk about the fact that we had a funeral procession down at the air show this year.
No, that's exactly right. In fact, what we did is we did a peace walk inside the federal building, but we also did one around the federal building with the drum, right? And I think in some sense you get people's attention when you make noise. And if it's meditative, it has this sort of like the walls of Jericho, maybe they'll come down, and so these are symbolic actions, because in some sense, the symbolism is important, that it represents that we are acknowledging our complicity, we're trying to pull a stone out of that wall that continues to create incredible violence and misery for ourselves and for the planet. And so these symbolic actions, just the fidelity of trying, is a powerful thing, and acknowledgement of our immense failure, and yet the continuation to stretch our imaginations of how to act on that, and keep reminding ourselves that we're always looking for that wedge, imaginatively, to do the opposite of what is business as usual in this country.
So the funeral procession, I thought, was well done. We had, I believe we had drums at the beginning, or at least one drum.
This would be on the Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday down at the air show, and moved from the workplace plaza, and we get gathered when people were actually coming in, and they just keep pouring in. So we went single file into the crowd coming in. Very slow. We had all our banners, we had a coffin, and I thought that was really eye-catching. And I think that's important. I mean, we could stand out there and, I think it really helps to bang the drum and have a coffin. So at the Federal Building, we took time to have readings at some point. I'm just going to share the one that I shared at the Federal Building that kind of is a motivation to me and my wife. This was written by Martin Luther King. He said, "You may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls upon you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause, and you refuse to do it because you are afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job, or you're afraid that you will be criticized, or that you will lose your popularity, or you're afraid that somebody will stab you, or shoot at you, or bomb your house, and so you refuse to take the stand. Well, you may go on and live until you are 90, but you are just as dead at 38 as you would be at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the spirit. You died when you refused to stand up for right. You died when you refused to stand up for truth. You died when you refused to stand up for justice." So thank you for taking your tax resistance stand. I think you're, standing up for the right
Well, I'm going to take advantage of putting up a chair here. Mike, this week, reached out to the three of us and asked if we'd give this little talk here. And Mike and Jim are two people that I never say no to. So and he asked just basically reflections on the air show. And so I have reflections on the air show, and I also have reflections on how I put that as part of a bigger context. As Gene was saying, that this air show, we did a funeral procession, and I was banging on my drum as leading the funeral procession. And one thing that struck me, I've been now part of the air show protests for 4 or 5 years, so not, not as long, not as weathered as these guys, and I haven't been arrested. So that's I always tell Jim that's my goal, is to be arrested with him someday. So we may be going up to New York City this week, and that opportunity might present itself there. But in years past, I've noticed that more hostility to our action. We would be outside by the 2 planes that Mike had demonstrated earlier in his talk, and we would just be doing a peaceful protest with our banners and not really engaging much. And so in those years, we garnered some hostility towards our actions, and resentment and anger and all that stuff. This year, it seemed different, and maybe it was because of the way we demonstrated, because we were using the prop of a coffin and processing in a very mournful way up and down the street in front of the entrance to the air show. But people actually, I was making observations as I was doing it. I was just wanting to see, okay, what are people, what might they be thinking when they see us approaching? And I just seemed to me a lot of contrition, you know, a lot of you know, averted glances and such like that, almost like they got the message of what we were trying to convey, much more than than people had in years past. And so I felt like we had made a very powerful statement. You know, does it change minds? Maybe. Who knows? But at least we were getting a clear message across that seemed to be received. And so I felt that, you know, our discernment process, the four of us spent many weeks trying to discern what is this going to look like. I felt like our discernment process, you know, it touched a nerve in the people that we were demonstrating in front of. And so, you know, with the air show, you know, I like to think of this in bigger context. You know, in my life, you know, the air show is a sliver of activism that I have been doing. And, you know, the observation that I had about the air show, number one, as I mentioned a moment ago, the four of us were discerning on what does this look like. So there was a community of four that, you know, were involved in the planning, the organizing, you know, how should all this, how should we all show up in this effort? And then there was the broader community, you know, the larger, the Catholic workers, some people that weren't necessarily part of the Catholic workers, but supporters of the cause nonetheless. And so we had, you know, that broader community showing up in force, as we already identified, both the day of the air show and the week prior at the federal building. And I think it was just very energizing, very powerful to be part of that community, part of that. We're supporting one another in this effort to make change in the world. And you know, I feel like, you know, through my discernment process, I feel like if we're going to make change in the world, it's going to have to come through community. And we're going to have to keep pulling together. And one of the reflections that I kind of wanted to rope in here was my experience at Standing Rock. I went to a Chetty Chikoan camp and spent 4.5 weeks there. And it was really an incredibly powerful, incredibly eye-opening experience for me of what community could look like and what community could achieve. I was part of the construction crew, and we had been tasked to winterize the camp. I went up there and I got there on election day of 2016, and we were looking at a very harsh winter, you know, right in front of us. And so the challenge was, how could we get this camp ready for weather that would get down into -30 with 70-mile-an-hour winds. So we, as the construction crew, you know, we were tasked to perform certain functions. They wanted to insulate the tents so that the floor would be off the ground and have an insulating barrier in them so that you just don't feel that cold quite so much. And we had a lot of Army tents. tents, and we had a lot of other kind of tents, and it was pretty daunting, the thought that how are we going to do this, achieve this, what they wanted us to achieve. And a lot of reflection went into that as far as, okay, how can we make this happen? I came up with this idea of modularization. We're going to build these platforms in one space and then truck them over to the tents and install them. And this modularization process allowed for a lot of people to participate because we weren't just a group of people going into a tent and building in place. We were building separate and trucking it over and installing. And this really allowed this construction process to accelerate. One of the observations I had made there was we were getting people going up to Bismarck, getting the materials, bringing them down, and then we would use them in the assembly process. And we had about 300 pieces of 2x4, 306 of 2x4 on the ground. And somebody just brought 1,500 more sticks of 2x4s used in this assembly, as well as plywood and such. And we had gotten it to such a point where within about 4 hours, we went through that entire stack of 1,800 pieces of wood. And this was, yes, it was made possible by the simplification of the process, but it was also huge. It was hugely important how community came together, how we would have just wave after wave of people coming in and helping with the process. So, people would work a few hours, maybe go do something else, maybe get something to eat. Other waves were coming in. It was what I would call radical community, because not only were we coming together in this assembly process, but in the greater picture of the camp was this sense of really helping one another, something that I've not experienced really outside of Chechi-Chicoan, and that is you have a need. Okay, one day I was loading up my truck, and I had some heavy material that I was loading onto it, and just shouting out to somebody, hey, can you give me a hand? And that person, on a task, on their way to do whatever they were doing that day, then they would drop everything and just come help. And it was that symbiotic relationship with everybody that, it was, my job is not too important that I can't take some time and help a brother or sister in need. And I feel like that, this sense of community, the community that we have with, in what we were doing in protesting the air show, the community that we had, Chechi-Chicoan is really the pathway forward. If we're going to affect serious change in the world, this is how we're going to have to go about it. We absolutely certainly must protest things on a federal level because we can't allow the maniacs to run the show without resistance. But if we want to really make the change, we're going to have to do it on a local level. And I wrote up some quick notes here. I want to see if there's anything else I would like to add. And the one thing I do want to say about the air show, my feeling about, why do we have a military the way we have the military. And I feel like the military is there to help ensure that we have easy access to resources, to fossil fuels, to other resources that we need for our daily living. And you know, I think that, you know, it's great. We're out protesting at the air show. You know, some of the people in the room, I'm not sure how many, also do the tax protest. I'm aware of those, and I think that's a great commitment to making change in the world. I think, too, some other things that, you know, at least as an observation in my life, is other ways that we can show up and resist this need, again, need for continued expansion of the military. And that is, you know, again, supporting our needs as consumers, as people living in America. And it's like, how can we step away from the use of these resources that the military is protecting? You know, what are ways in our lives that we could show up, you know, eat lower down the food chain, you know, commute to work on bikes or public transportation, all of these different efforts that we can do, you know, stop, in general, just stop consuming so much, so that, you know, we have less of a need to, for a military and less of a need to fund the military. You know, the military, you know, it just has imperialistic intentions, and you know, we consciously or unconsciously are contributors of that, and as a society. And you know, how can we start to separate that? And it's a mindful practice. So those are the words I had to share with you. Thank you for the time. Thank you, Mike, for inviting me to speak.
Thank you.